Hi, Tom.
Hello. No, it's a foundation for combat anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
Robert Kraft. So, yeah, a bunch of these pins. I've been wearing a pin. So that's first thing I wore my old Creative Capital pen.
Ooh.
Going back a few administrations. Yeah, that was terrible.
That was really bad. I saw that the other day. That cool warmer thing.
Oh, yeah. Well, you had to go deep to think that up. You know?
I forgot about
You know.
that one. Cool.
But
Good. Good evening, I'm Providence Councilwoman Joanne Ryan. I'm calling the special commission for taxation and revenue regular meeting to order. It is Monday, December 11th, and it is 5:04 p.m. Madam Clerk, would you kindly read the roll?
Chairwoman Joy Ryan,
Present.
Vice Chairman Michael Diaz,
President.
Councilman Pedro Espinal,
Present.
Councilor Sue Engelbart,
Present.
Commissioner Mancini,
Present.
Commissioner Connor Wells, Present, Commissioner Driver,
Present.
Commissioner Scars,
I'm here.
Commissioner Stolzen.
Present.
We have 9 present, we have a quorum.
Wonderful. Do we have the solicitor with us this evening? Do we have I see a panelist there? Maybe she's on.
I have not disconnected her.
I had that problem happen at the finance meeting.
Sitting next to the wire.
That's dangerous. There she is.
Hello.
Solicitor Freeze, are you with us?
I am.
All's well with the world then. Okay, don't go too far. Madam Clerk, would you kindly read the first item?
Item number 1, draw discussion of city taxes structure. The following has been invited: Cliff Wood, Executive Director of the Providence Foundation, and Thomas O. Sweeney, Seer, Sweeney Real Estate and Advisor.
Wonderful. Can I ask that you gentlemen come to the table? We have some exhibits that I'd like to enter into the record. My next exhibit would be T, right?
Yeah.
Correct. You. So let's get these in before we get you folks sworn in. So I've got a 2-page document entitled, with the header of the Providence Foundation, Statement to the Special Committee for Taxation. And Revenue, Cliff Wood, Executive Director of the Providence Foundation, dated December 11, 2023. Let's call that Exhibit T. And I have that moved by Vice Chair Dibier, seconded by Councilman Espinal. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. Item T, Exhibit T is entered into the record. Also have a very long document, appears to be 105 pages, dated August 23, titled 50 State Property Tax Comparison Study for Taxes Paid in 2022, authored by the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy. Minnesota Center for Fiscal Excellence is also on the first page. Let's call this Exhibit U. Motion made by Vice Chair Didier, seconded by Councilman Espinal. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. We have 2 exhibits entered into the record. Madam Clerk, would you kindly swear these gentlemen in?
You raise your right hand. Do you swear under the penalty
or perjury, that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please state your names and titles for the record, please.
I'm Cliff Wood, Executive Director of the Providence Foundation. Thomas Sweeney, Principal at Sweeney Real Estate.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, just a point of information, I'm not sure all
Councilman
of,
Stolzen,
I'm sorry.
excuse me, Commissioner Stolzen,
Yeah.
I promoted you. to council.
Thank you.
Just got elected.
Yeah.
I declined the promotion. Thank you.
Good choice, excellent choice.
I'm not sure all the commissioners have the exhibits in the binder. If we could just get copies circulated, at least I don't, and it appears like
Have
Ms.
the,
Kennard
have the
does.
exhibits been
Everybody
distributed?
has on their binder at the end.
I have S,
As
But I-
two
I-
pages long.
oh, I see what you're saying, okay,
I
thank
didn't
you.
put the exhibit,
Yes, yes,
letter.
I apologize, yes, Madam Chair, I do have.
Excuse me, I'd like to point out, if you were a council person, you would know that the clerks never make mistakes.
I concur, Madam
I,
Chair.
I assumed it was my book at fault, not the
Commissioner
clerk.
Chief Mancini is well aware of that,
I give great praise to the clerk. The backbone of the city.
as do I.
Thank you for pointing it out.
Okay, so,
You're gonna make me miss it here, and then you had such a good time.
Madam Clerk, who's swearing in?
We did.
Where is it?
Did I miss that? Whew, okay, see, Commissioner Stolzman, you're making me,
I apologize for
all
the
kinds of frazzles.
Frolic in detail.
Well, firstly, I'd like to thank you very much for making yourself available on short notice. I would like to add, to join this very important commission in our exercise to study the tax, and revenue structure for the city of Providence. We've been on this now for some number of weeks, and, we're getting close to concluding. We have to have a report to the council for its first meeting in January. We've discussed a number of topics, but one that we haven't really delved into is the commercial tax. I guess we can all say that we know that it's high, but we wanted to invite you gentlemen in. Actually, Commissioner Stolzman and others suggested that you would be wonderful to testify or to provide some color on this topic to this commission. So with that, I invite you to make a presentation on the commercial tax in the city of Providence, your thoughts, any ideas, concerns you have that we should be mindful of as we look at a new way or recommendations for changes in our existing tax structure. With that, I don't know who wants to start, but it's yours.
Tom wants me to start, so I'll start. Thanks, Stephanie. No, I don't.
Former Councilman Cliff Wood, please take it away.
Very formal, thank you. Thank you. Madam Chair, did everyone have a chance to look at this? I will avoid reading it if everyone read it already.
Has everyone had an opportunity? I think it would be fortuitous if you could kind of walk us through. You don't have to read it word for word, but just give us the.
So basically, the few points that I tried to make in this short submission are that I've been around for a while and have had an opportunity to sort of be development adjacent in a lot of different roles here, nonprofit, for-profit. I've been a member of the city council. At that time, I was on the finance committee. So I think, though, as Tom teased me a little bit for my disclaimers, I just wanted to make a point that although I don't have a degree in any of this, I definitely have enough exposure to feel confident in sharing these thoughts with you today. And as you acknowledged, Madam Chair, we have a very high commercial tax rate, amongst the highest in the country, second to Chicago and Detroit's very large places. And the rate is double that, our rate is double that of Boston, and we talk about our sort of competition and symbiosis with Boston all the time, so those are important things. What I've noticed over the time here is that the concerns and actually the obstacles have been very consistent over the years, over the past 2 or 3 decades, and that this is very much our rate of taxation, among other things. It's very much a barrier. And that's problematic generally, especially when you think about the large things that we set aside for development, like the center, like the 195 lands. These are very big and ambitious things, and if people aren't coming, and this is a large reason it might be worth thinking of. I did mention though also that sort of if not stated explicitly, implicitly, the government understands that when they make those blanket changes, like the 195 commission, that might indicate that that problem exists. They wanted to have a more expedient way to address that for that project, but it doesn't mean that we're on the hook, for the rest of the city. There's been a lot awful talk for years and years. It's been very amplified lately about tax stabilization agreements as well. And I understand people maybe are not fans of those, maybe with some good critique, maybe not. But that aside, those in my observation, again, for-profit, nonprofit, have been a tool that's been required for virtually every development I can think of. And in my mind, that's because it's a quick way to remediate the problem. As you know full well, taking this task on yourselves, this is a pretty big lift. And I think an overhaul of our system is in order in general, hoping that it would reflect the sort of realities that would allow us to attract investment beyond people who just want to be here for love of the city or for other reasons. And then a specific thing that I wanted to point out that happens in other places, again, because we're talking about our very serious dearth of housing in this country, but certainly in this city, in this state. And considering, if you think, the dynamics of supply and demand should be in play, we should have housing being built. We should be hearing the drills and the hammers right now, and we're not. So what's the problem? Certainly the tax rate is one of them. And where they have sort of attempted to decouple commercial tax rates from residential in other places, they have kind of a third path. So there's a residential tax, there's a commercial tax, but we find here you have mixed-use buildings paying full commercial tax. So you'll have the first floor of residential, you'll have 6 floors of both. The first floor of commercial, 6 floors of residential, you charge the whole building commercial rate. Just not great math. I think the proof's in the pudding. Again, supply and demand would dictate that we're building houses like gangbusters, we're not. And that's a real problem that people up and down the economic spectrum suffer from, as you again all know full well. And so I would make that recommendation that we think about sort of a third path, a third tranche, a third middle way for taxing when we have mixed-use properties. The rest of it's in here. I do reference some actual experts in the, and as mentioned, the Councilwoman of the Lincoln Institute, very well respected organization documents, and there's a lot in there I think you would all enjoy as it pertains to your mission here, having a look through that. So with that, I would thank you for calling me, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them, and if you don't, we have a very intelligent person up next, so we'll be happy to take them.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Wood at this point? Commissioner Sabers?
Sure. I hope you take my teasing in the spirit.
I'm a fan of yours, Tom.
Okay, good. I'm just wondering if what we are interested in is action, is trying to figure out what to do. Like we share your concerns about the rate. We're just not really sure, what are the options, what are the alternatives that we can propose. And I wonder if you have spent any time thinking about, if only, if there was a magic wand, what kind of policy would you have us recommend?
I would say that I would go back and say that the idea of thinking of a way to tax mixed-use projects in a way that isn't fully commercial would be the most concrete way.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a short term, it would be probably helpful to have as much of a dispassionate explanation to the general public as well as other people who govern what tax stabilization agreements are and what they are, because I do see them as probably being a bridge.
I should probably clarify, if that's okay, I should probably clarify my question though. Part of our charge, like we all want to be able to cut taxes.
Oh, sure.
But it's not really clear how to do that in a responsible way.
Yeah. Well,
without finding something else to substitute.
Sure.
And I wonder if there are other things that you've thought of, that places, opportunities that the city might have to raise additional revenue that could be devoted to lowering the commercial rate or
that's a heavy, honestly, Tom, that's a heavy ask since I got invited to come on Thursday.
Yeah.
Today.
Yeah.
But, I would be more than happy if you think I could add value offline to talk about what you guys are exploring, if there's anything that comes out of this, if you think I can be helpful toward that. We can do some best practices, and I do think it's gonna have to taper over time, honestly, like you said, we have government do little money, and if I recall, it was quite a long time ago, I didn't have these yet. But, you know, we only had discretion over 6 or 7% of the city budget, when we were doing finance committee, so I understand that this is problematic. However, obviously, this problem is rising to a degree that informs this commission. And it's certainly, as I mentioned before, it's sort of correlate to this housing crisis, and that's today's problem. So it's not like we can say, well, it's just really hard, we can't borrow from you to pay for all, it's just how's it gonna go? Because we have some real pressing problems, and this is intertwined in a lot of it. Also, what I didn't mention in my verbal comments that's in here is the idea of expanding the tax base. So when you think about Capital Center, you think about 195 Commission, and back in the day when we were doing the down city corridor, which is for the most part done, although parking lots are still there. I mean, we want to think about ways to incentivize people to develop on lots, because soon knows lots of reasons why that makes sense. So these are all things that I think exist in the world that we could apply here and then put numbers on them and decide how to prioritize. But this isn't just, you know, I feel like sometimes there's a notion that, well, there's just developers and they're bummed out because they're getting taxes they don't want to pay. But these are leading to real problems, not only for people who we are inviting here to develop, inviting here to invest, but people are already here and coming and going to public school and all the whole thing. So maybe with another 48 hours, we can come up with better ideas than that without fail.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Anyone else with that, before we start?
If I may, Madam Chair,
Yes.
Mr. Wood, you've talked about the TSAs, and you and I have worked together on this with City Council and the current, or prior and current ordinance that governs tax stabilization agreements. When you were talking about making those more useful as bridges, one of the things we've kind of talked about, maybe we'll get a chance to talk about some more, is rather than a TSA being a full governmental enterprise with an ordinance introduced to the council for each one, if the development community, including small mom and pops, had the opportunity to say, if I invest X number of dollars in a commercial property, my taxes don't go down, but my increase is phased in, so I can get a return or lease up those apartments. Let's assume it's an apartment building where I can lease up that commercial space. That there might be a more formulaic administrative way to implement that with all the protections that are in the ordinance. I'm not saying to change, that's another policy discussion, but from a pure tax standpoint, to incent a building of the tax base and to incentivize additional capital investment, if there was a more streamlined process to take advantage of phasing in one's capital investment over time, the development community through the Providence Foundation, the committee I was on working with Cliff and his colleagues there, the development community thought that would be a pretty efficient way to be able to tell outside capital, people thinking about investing in Providence, that this is a system there. Here's the ordinance, here's the application, and not have to say, well, but in addition to that, we've got to go through a whole governmental legislative process each and every time. And many developers will say, well, that's something that, how long does that take? We don't know. I mean, there haven't been any TSAs this year, for example. And that's not a criticism of the council by any means. It's just the nature of the beast. That if it's done in 60 days in Boston and 30 days in Worcester, can we have a 60-day process here in Providence where here's the formula and here's how it's addressed? So I didn't mean to go on too long about, but is that the type of thing you were thinking about in terms of TSA?
Yes, that's absolutely true. That's something that we've been trying to bring forward for quite a long time. I mean, personally, my predecessors, for as long as I know, the idea of the predictability is the most important thing. So if it's 30 days and they know it's 30, they can factor that in. If it's 90, they don't know it's 90. They'll know that if they do this, this is what happens. If they provide this, this is what the incentive looks like. That gives them an opportunity as they consider coming here, as opposed to taking their finance to Somerville or where else they're going to go. They can do that math, and then they can even factor in intangibles alongside that. Why it's cooler here than Somerville, for instance. But having that money piece locked in a way, having something that's predictable, is absolutely something that we would embrace and have promoted for some time.
How do we adjust our tax structure so that TSAs aren't essential? And the only instrument, quite frankly, to provide relief to incentivize.
This is the problem, right? So
Right.
this is the problem. So again, Tom asked me a good question that I'm not quick enough to answer, but that's what the charge of this committee is to figure out how to make us not look like this the next time Lincoln comes out, because it's not working for us. And I imagine that it'll continue to be the same until we fix it.
Mr. Sweeney,
Okay,
what are your thoughts
okay.
on this topic?
So, Councilwoman Ryan and members, for those of you who don't know, I'm Tom Sweeney, I'm the principal of Sweeney Real Estate Appraisal in Providence, a licensed real estate broker in Rhode Island and Massachusetts, and a certified general appraiser in the state of Rhode Island. I've been actively involved in real estate since 1983, with only a few years where I did not have an office in downtown Providence. So I've done appraisals and brokerage in the city, everything from a single family house to some of the major office buildings. So I believe one of the first commercial appraisals I did was with my father, was on the triangle where the Homewood Suites now stands, when it was created by moving with the river. So I've been around for a little while. So I think I've had what I like to call a courtside seat of the real estate market in the city of Providence over the last 40 years. The issue I've been asked to address is the impact of the city's disproportionately high, what I consider the disproportionately high tax rate has had on development throughout the city. Cliff just provided information as to where we rank among cities across the nation and in the region, and that does have an impact. One of the things that I do know, and has been just brought up, is that most of the major development within the city, downtown and throughout the neighborhoods, has generally come in looking for individual tax stabilization agreements, which doesn't make it easy for anybody. The issues that people face, developers in developing in the city of Providence, as I'm sure we're all aware, is that while the rental rates in the city of Providence have gotten better, they haven't gone up as much significantly as those in our surrounding communities, not communities, cities, specifically Boston. So right now, I'm sure the committee is well aware that to do new construction in the city of Providence, you're paying rates for labor and supplies and construction materials that are or equal to that what they're paying in Boston, except for the fact that Boston's rents are 30% higher, and that is having a major impact on any proposed development. What that has to do with taxes is that it makes every deal tighter. So the scenario I like to look at is, we're about 35.4 per thousand in the city of Providence for commercial tax rate. If you apply that to a $10 million project within the city, that's about $354,000 in taxes. If our rate was $30 a thousand, that's $300,000 on that same project. That $50,000 difference equates to about $500,000, if not more, in value to a project. So it's about 5.5% of the total project. If that is applied to someone who's already on a tight project, that's the impact. It could make it infeasible, and the next thing they know, they're knocking on the city's door to get a tax stabilization to make the project. I believe feasibility is the major hindrance that is the impact of the taxes where they are right now. Do I have a solution? No, I do not. I'm not as smart as Cliff. I'm someone who sits on the outside and hopes that we will come up with one. I do agree with Cliff that we do need, and what a lot of the people we talk to want, is a competitive and predictable tax structure in the city. How we get to it, I still don't know, but again, Commissioner Stolzman just mentioned it, if with that type of thing where someone knows how they go through A, B, C, D, I think is very critical to any developer looking in, because as opposed to coming in, as we're to an extent doing now with certain projects, is one-offs and keep doing that. That is, they're looking for that comfort of stability, and I think that's what we have to look at.
Do we know what the commercial tax rate is in, Boston?
So
I was just gonna try to.
A little short of 18, a little more than 18.
18.
Yeah.
It's in that report.
And again, Councilwoman, Boston is a different animal. It does have a significantly larger commercial base, but it's still something that has to be taken into account.
What about Connecticut?
Hartford is on, what's this? Well, Bridgeport is on here and it's 3.04, and Hartford is less than that.
Yeah, that's a
Commissioner
total taxes comparison, not just the real estate taxes, but we could identify the real estate tax rate.
Commissioner Driver, you have, say something?
As far as, I mean, I have a lot of people who come down from Boston looking for residential real estate. Do you have a lot of folks coming down from that area looking for commercial real estate? Are they comparing and at least checking the place out? And what are you seeing? Do you do a lot of
There is companies that are considering moving just because the difference in rates. So we're in Boston, you're at, $60 a square foot for downtown office space, if not more. We're probably in a building in the low to mid 30s. They are looking, but they're not, again, we're in flux right now with office space because you don't have to be there. You don't have to be where you are, for lack of a better, I mean, so with work at home and things like that, that's impacting. And while we're not impacted as much as Boston is right now, we're still going through the process. I mean, I just looked today and saw a building that I didn't know was available for sublease, just came on the market. It's like 20,000 square feet in downtown. That's going to be impacted because the rates, what people are willing to pay, are going to start getting closer and closer. And again, we're taxed at what we are, which I think is around $5 a square foot for buildings downtown. It's going to impact bottom lines and values.
I'm just curious how many people actually tap in with your phone.
It's more now developers looking to do things that are happening on the 195 lanes and things like that on the east side with apartment buildings.
Building new
Yes,
things,
yes.
not looking for stuff that already exists.
They are looking, a lot of the transactions, well, residentially, the larger ones are not in state players. There are a lot of state players who are looking at the returns.
Is there a move to convert, focus, I guess, or actually convert some of the buildings downtown that are, not residential into residential?
Well, you've got that really big one in the middle of the city that hopefully that's gonna happen. There are other ones that I think are, in discussion, just because it all comes down to how they lay out and if it's feasible to do it. Again, it's gonna be a cost issue. I believe most of the conversions have tax stabilization agreements downtown. So.
Commissioner Stolzman.
Tom, if you could, Madam Chair, if I may ask
Please.
Mr. Sweeney, you went through quickly, but we haven't had a chance at the commission to talk about how properties are valued based on income and how that annual income is then converted by an application of a capitalization rate to a value. Could you walk us through your $10 million example, just so we have the mechanics of how you did that on the record?
Yeah, so it's currently the tax rate is $35.40 per thousand for commercial property. On a $10 million property, you essentially divide that. What I'm doing, Rob, is determining what that amount was. In valuing the property by capitalization, you take what is called the net income after you take all expenses from the gross income and determine a net income, and then you apply a capitalization rate, which is a combination of the risk that the person investing is looking at, and if they have mortgage financing, the mortgage financing part of it. That combination results in an overall capitalization rate, which is then applied to the net income. Essentially, you divide the net income by that capitalization rate to come up arrive at a value. So what I was saying is, with a $50,000 delta between the two rates, bringing that, saying that money is now not available from a value standpoint, I took the capitalization rate of 9%, which today is, it used to be, when I first got into the business, everything was 10%, you were great. It's going down to as low as 6%. But so being conservative, I used a 9% rate, and that told me that $50,000, which is no longer available to the owner of the property, is about $500,000 in value.
So you divide the $50,000 by the cap, what we
Correct.
call the cap rate, and $50,000 divided by 9% gives you that several $100,000 of
Correct.
value.
Yes.
And the reason I raise that, Madam Chair, is just mechanically what we find happening in my practice and in Tom's practice, Mr. Sweeney's practice, is there will be sometimes small family investment firms, sometimes large publicly traded firms that are looking to deploy capital and invest in different cities. And they may be looking to invest to either buy an existing apartment building or build a new apartment building or buy some houses. And the first thing that they do, and it's, I'm now surprised to see that these are usually people younger than my daughter, right out of college. They're cranking numbers, they're analysts, and they're like, oh, so Mr. Stolzman, we were referred to you, what is your tax rate? And we could see all this publicly. Are there any development fees in Providence? What's the average? They go through a list of questions, and what's the cost to do this, the cost to do that? And I say, oh, how wonderful Providence is, because we don't have any impact fees upon development, and we have this great life sciences infrastructure, with this great university infrastructure. You love to invest in Providence. And invariably, that person's supervisor calls and says, this tax rate must be in error. This can't be the right tax rate, because that throws the project out of line. It's $10 million investment, but we're $500,000 short. My rate of return, my return on investment drops precipitously with that cost. Is this an error? It must be, the 3 must be a 2, right? It's 24, not 34, 25, not 35. So we say, no, but we have a bunch of tools, tax stabilization agreements, and also the cost of business is lower in other areas. So that's it's a real issue. I'm not saying that the whole city should just capitulate to the business community and just raise taxes. I'm not saying that at all. But to expand the tax rate on the commercial base and try to expand our commercial base, including apartment buildings, I'm including that for people investing to make a return on investment. We just have to address it at some point, figure out a way to do that, because it's turning into a value perception. The value of investing in Providence with this rate is a barrier to entry.
Commissioner Schultz, my question?
Councilwoman Edward.
In what you were just saying, Commissioner, you were talking about what rate of return they're looking for with your clients. Do you know, like, what rate of return are they looking for that this is eating into? Are they looking for some, like?
Well, you see ranges, some long-term hold companies will be pretty low by most investment standards. You'll see it as low as 7 or 8% return investment. That's very low, but if they think that the long-term value and the rise, I've never seen anything lower than 7%. Mr. Sweeney may have a low example, but usually you see in the mid-teens to 20% return on investment is the annualized rate of return that a developer would expect to get, because they can deploy the capital in a variety of lower risk ways. Is that, I'd ask Mr. Sweeney, he's really probably.
It's the lowest it gets significantly lower when investors are looking at single freestanding, single tenant corporate drugstores, things like that. But for generally stuff around the city of Providence, from an investment standpoint, it's anywhere from 12 to 15%.
Okay.
And if it's on riskier projects, it gets a lot higher.
Commissioner Savarez?
There's a few, that's the actual capitalization rate that you're using, or that's the return that you're using to calculate the cap?
That's the return, an equity return that they would be looking for. The cap rates are closer to at or around anywhere from a lower 6 to a high of 10.
Would you like to continue?
I can, but it's more, they're more speculative questions than questions about their, there are some ideas that we have spoken about around the table here. Commissioner Driver has brought up a few times the possibility of taxing underutilized property, and some, well, to avoid confusing things, I guess I'd ask your opinions about that. I mean, here's a chance to weigh in on that as a possibility. The city does actually have the authority to levy an underutilized property tax, but it's we heard testimony that it is such a large tax. It's $100 per thousand. I mean, there's enabling state legislation to permit that, to tax underutilized property, but because it's such a large tax, there is, it turns out people are sort of unwilling to levy it.
Mhm.
That was, I think that was testimony from the first or second meeting that we had. And I wonder what your opinion would be about looking to underutilized property to surface parking lots and mostly vacant buildings, or just simply vacant property as an additional source of revenue. Do you have an opinion about that?
You have to, are there other conditions, or is it just that there's a definition of an underutilized property and it's not developed, that you can do?
The enabling state legislation leaves the definition, as far as I can read it, to the discretion of the city. And what we heard from the assessor is that it's very seldom deployed because it is such a large tax. It's like bringing down some giant sledgehammer when you really want to nudge somebody.
Are there any mechanisms to pre-nudge before the hammer?
There are not. There are not currently, but that's essentially why the assessor said that it's so seldom, that the hammer is so seldom used. I'm just asking.
Yeah, I can't speak on behalf of the group, but I'm happy to speak.
Yeah, that's all I'm asking.
I would say that, as you pointed out or referred to before, we have a problem. We have more needs than we can pay for. We have less building than we have available to build the tax base up in the meantime. And people don't like the one tool that we do have to build it in the meantime. So I would say that in terms of whatever comes out of this group after the 3 months, if you have been made aware of a mechanism, it should be presented.
Mhm.
I would personally, just only hearing about this now, say that it probably makes sense to have something that goes on pre-hammer, right? So like I'm thinking about the comment that Councilman in Broadstone just made about parking lots.
Mhm.
I think that there should be some incentives to develop parking lots, especially in dense places where, et cetera. Do I think that tomorrow morning that you can go to developers and say, develop that, or we're gonna charge you $100 per? I'm not sure that is fair. So I'd like to see some steps toward that, but I think at this point, at least for public discussion, anything that you unearth should be put down in the documents. I'm hoping that whatever you guys come up with, just is not the end of it. It's a mechanism to have a larger public policy discussion, so that's fine.
Okay.
Vice Chair DeVries?
I'm trying to look for the reference, but I thought it was a 10% charge for underdeveloped property that the state
Yeah,
statute provides.
$100 per thousand. That's 10%.
I thought it was 10% of the tax rate.
Oh, have I misunderstood?
I could be wrong, but
Well, the testimony was that it was large enough, that because the tax was onerous enough, people were unwilling to use it.
I thought it was just the opposite, that it wasn't big enough to matter. So,
That's a very
We can
important-
revisit.
That is,
Tough.
that is.
We'll revisit that, that's certainly
Okay,
beyond this gentleman. Do you have any further testimony, gentlemen, for us? Do we have any commissioners that have questions?
At some point, Madam Chair, it might be helpful to us if the assessor or the finance office could just do a little back of the envelope modeling for us as what the impact would be. For example, if we, and this might come out in suggested reports, but with it, if we did a little math, that if we were able to lower the commercial rate a little bit per year over a 3 or 5 year period, lower the homestead exemption on higher properties. Is there a way to balance this out on a 5-year plan that we could, with some credibility, think that what we're doing is appropriately taxing the right properties equitably and also helping become more competitive on the commercial side, and maybe even include in that an apartment rate, over 6 apartment rate or over 3 apartment rate. Let's pick some number to suggest where the math works out. Because we've been doing this on a conceptual basis without any math, which is
Right.
awfully dangerous. But at some point, are there math models that help us guide us on this? Because I think we're all in agreement, we want equitable tax structures. I've not heard anybody on the commission think that we want to hurt anybody with taxes. Yeah, and we also recognize we have an odd tax structure that's developed over the years with shifting to the commercial and then using a high homestead exemption. So it would be fun to see people that know what they're doing with the math.
Sure.
So you
We
might
can
be
do that.
influenced by this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. With it could be with the suggestions from staff on what to do.
Solicitor Freeze, do you have any input on this topic? Okay,
On the non-utilization tax,
sure, you can provide clarification on that.
I'm just looking through the things we've put together in the past on it, and I mean, it just, as far as I remember, was not just the tax assessor's office, it was also the Department of Inspection and Standards, who is charged with having to, document from a particular date and time, a vacancy, and then it had to prove a continuous vacancy to be able to then assess the tax, which was also onerous. And I was just trying to confirm whether it was the $100 per. I'm not.
We did.
I can get back to the commission on that.
I have it here. It's,
Commissioner Sigaris, let's let her finish.
sorry, so sorry.
Please. Continue, Solicitor.
Thank you. No, I'm just looking at whether it's wholly, I see all the ordinances around it, 21259, which sunset, 21254, which imposes the tax. My recollection, and I don't have the numbers on me right now, but my recollection was that it wasn't the best tool, not just because it's throwing sort of a property at negative equity, even further into negative equity where taxes may not have been paid to begin with, but it was also taxing the city of Providence in a way that we didn't really have systems in place to do it. In other words, all that documentation of a date specific and then another set of documentation a year later to be able to assess with real validity. That was my recollection.
Okay. Do you want to follow up?
I did just confirm the rate, but I'm looking at the state statute, which is $10 per 100 or $100 per 1,000.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Solicitor. Commissioner Driver.
I recognize it, some of the stuff you don't have to go through inspections and standards and but they're building. I was downtown in a bunch of Oberlin on Sunday. I'm walking around. some of these buildings, I think a lot of us know, have been vacant. The first floor is occupied and some businesses in there, but the whole upstairs has been vacant. And it's just, like, okay, so what, we don't need to be Inspector Clouseau to figure out, like, these things are sitting there. The same thing, there's a building near me over on the west side, it's been sitting there near the Citizens Bank building. It's been vacant, it has one shop in it that serves bubble tea. It's like, so I don't know, it's just frustrating. You look at a building like the Arcade and they develop all these small apartments and they sell like gangbusters and they're occupied, it's thriving. And so it's just frustrating to hear all these hurdles, and I totally get it, but it's like last week we heard about the tax situation and people that are scamming the system and pretending that they still live there, and we can't fix that because we can't get old people to down, like, it's like, okay, so maybe we can just like figure out how to fix some of this stuff and streamline it and not try to reinvent the wheel here, and I think it would help it will help a little bit.
I agree, and all those little fixes help. Okay, gentlemen, I want to thank you very much for coming on such short notice. You really, you helped us out, and I appreciate that. I don't think we have any further questions of you, so you're certainly free to leave. I don't want to hold you too much longer. And thank you again for joining us. And I'll probably follow up with both of you on some topics.
Thank you.
Solicitor Priest, do you have any presentation for us? I know there was some outstanding questions.
Sure, you had asked I prepare a little bit on the circuit breaker and
Yes.
perhaps put together something that addresses the homestead owner occupied rate questions and the West Warwick model with some of the questions of the commission being addressed.
Let's start with circuit breakers.
Okay, so I took a look at.
Can you share your screen with us? Do you have anything to show us? I just have a hard time talking to the.
I don't think I'd have permission to share my screen.
Can you give her permission?
I don't think so. Let's see.
She's not, she's on it by phone, so I don't know if it's
Have to
not
promote
allowing.
her?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's bring you.
If I emailed one of the clerks, maybe?
Do we have time to do that? Let's just continue. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'm happy to do the
Okay.
presentation, and then there's basically 3 memos I can provide
Okay.
clerk
And to the
to the commission if that's the best way to do this.
Okay, let's walk us through what you can.
Sure. So in my research on circuit breaker, what I found was that in Rhode Island, the circuit breaker statute is chapter 33 of title 44. And in that statute, before 2014, anyone could apply for an income tax refund or a discount based on sliding income ranges that are included in the statute. 4433.9 has these income brackets, and likely in all of yours and my experience, this translates to what I'm assuming is, the 1048 when you're filing your income tax return. It's also within a couple of slides that I'll provide to the commission, to the clerk for the commission. But, before 2014, you could apply, depending on your income, for this income tax refund or discount off of your income tax. But in 2014, for unknown reasons, although I'm sure we can all guess, that refund amount was narrowed so that only folks over 65 and those who are disabled could apply for those income tax refunds or discounts. Again, this is all the state of Rhode Island, having nothing to do with the city. And
so we follow the state rules relative to this circuit breaker?
So that's chapter 33 of title 44. It's a state statute.
What is the income? What's the income amount?
So there's all different thresholds. in 44,
Highest threshold.
yeah, 4433.9 shows you all of those income thresholds, but I can give you sort of examples that I grabbed from there. So like if you were, and obviously this is just part of the sliding scales in the statute, but if your income was between, let's say, $15,001 and $35,000, this actually part of the income tax statute says it doesn't matter if you're one person or two or more in that family, your income tax refund.
So listen, let me just ask a couple of questions. So the circuit breaker is income based,
Yes.
correct?
Yep.
And the high watermark is about $35,000. Is
Yes.
that the highest?
I think,
So
yeah.
there are some levels within that.
6,000 to 35,000. Yep.
So up until 2014, it was just income based. After 2014, it became age based, over 65 or some disability, correct? To qualify?
Right. Additional requirements. It was only applicable. These income tax ranges and breaks were, as defined by the statute, were only allowed to those over 65 or those who were disabled.
Do we know how many people in Providence qualify or take advantage of this?
Because the city doesn't have anything to do with that, that's a question for the state.
Okay. Commissioner Segura, do you have a question?
I just have some perspective about the
Go right ahead,
2014.
please.
The change in 2014, before 2014, the state, and this is going to sound sort of improbable, but it is actually true. The state had a budget line item for the circuit breaker, and they only actually awarded the first X million dollars worth of applications that they got, which is kind of an absurd way to do it. It was when they converted it into an actual entitlement that when you filled it out, you got it. That's when they also restricted it to be only for elderly and disabled people.
Interesting.
This expanded last year.
Yes,
A little bit, yeah.
What was the expansion?
it's really the Rhode Island household tax credit. You have to provide.
Commissioner Mancini, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's if I'm not mistaken, it's a credit that shows up by filing Rhode Island 1040H. Even if you have no taxable income, you can file the form. It's based on income below, I believe, 35,000, as Mrs. Friesen pointed out. You have to answer 5 questions, and I believe you have to provide the total tax bill, not too much the bill. If the preparer is filling it out, they enter the amount of your taxes. It calculates a maximum of 6% of either your income or the taxes. I think the credit this year went up to $650.
Max credit, right?
Maximum credit. Up from originally 10 years ago, it was at 300, then it went to 375, 400. It has increased over a decade. It's now 650.
How many of those folks are homeowners? Do we know?
One of the values,
Commissioner Mancini, sorry.
I do not know this. I do not have the statistical breakdown of, but they, it can either be the landlord or the tenant.
Okay. Commissioner Segura.
thank you. That was what I was going to say, is that there is a formula in it that allows you to impute part of your rent to property tax.
That's correct.
So it's a thing that is available both to renters and to owners.
Underutilized.
And at one time, Madam Chair, if I may, the state was somewhat punitive about it. If you did not file that form without extensions were not permitted by the April 15th deadline. Despite you would be placed in the first round of available appropriation. Once it cleared that group of individuals, then and only then, whatever was residual would then be considered to be paid for those who filed subsequent. But April 15th is considered to be the date at which you have to file that form. You do not have to file an income tax return to receive it. It's a standalone form, RI 1040H.
Thoughts, Solicitor Freeze? Any suggestions, thoughts on this topic?
Or, I mean, as I started to learn about this, you know, I thought to myself, if the idea here is to try something like this from the city's perspective, it's going to be put a big responsibility on us to try to figure out what to do with all of this income tax information in terms of security and otherwise. What I thought made some more sense was rolling this into that ask of the state. You know, if part of our ask of the state was for more pilot monies, or part of the ask of the state was other things this commission has discussed, maybe part of the ask to the state is to, you know, go back to a time when these income tax breaks were more holistically allowed, or to change those income tax breaks so that the you know, the constituents would receive more of a break in their state income tax. And I think this goes back to something, you know, Tom has been talking about, which is more of this sort of equity and economics conversation with the state, that they are collecting more tax monies in the city, and perhaps this is their way of putting some more money back in the pockets of the constituents, rather than us trying to figure it out at the state level.
Vice Chair DeBeers, thank you.
So state level circuit breakers are good policy measures to the extent that they condition property tax relief based on the ability to pay. Unlike, for example, the homestead exemption, which is unrelated to income. The one we have around is relatively ungenerous in total. So, but if you think about it, to the extent that Providence has relatively low tax rates for its homeowners and for renters, except for those who rent from commercial properties, they're less advantaged. Providence residents are less advantaged by the circuit breaker than many other communities. But it can get very expensive. I mean, it's a good way to provide property tax relief, but it can get very expensive. I guess what I'm trying to say is it helps. The higher the taxes, the more your residents are helped by the tax relief.
Gotcha. Okay. What else do you have for us, Lister?
I'll try to cover homestead, owner occupied, non-owner occupied, and West Warwick quickly. But the idea here was that once upon a time, really from 2013 to 2018 or so, there was this owner occupied versus non-owner occupied rate. We have the ability to do a homestead versus the owner occupied rate right now. That's in state statute. That's a part of the 44.511.8 legislation. We just need to amend our annual ordinance to choose. And then the rest is really the more creative that we want to get with that homestead versus owner occupied, like our sister jurisdictions in Woonsocket and Newport and Central Falls and West Warwick. We need special legislation like they all have. Woonsocket 44.575, Newport 44.578, Central Falls 44.33. All had special legislation tied to homestead and really families living in the home, where West Warwick, a model that this commission was considering emulating, had more of a like four class structure. In reality, it had one commercial class and then 3 residential rates. So there was different ways of breaking down the obligation by single family unit, 2 family unit with owner occupants, 2 to 5 and 6 plus. So certainly there, I mean, the good news is there's definitely legislation out there to emulate, but we would need to seek authority from the General Assembly, because the rule of thumb is, in the taxation world, unless there's unequivocal instruction from the state to tax, then you can't do it. So the unequivocal instruction from the state for Providence currently exists in 44.11.8 with the 4 classes with the rate structure. I think what's a little bit less clear is when we start talking about what falls into residential and commercial. We know wholly residential is residential. We know wholly commercial is commercial. It looks as though mixed use 5 and under is residential, mixed use 5 and over can go in either category, but it does not look like you can segregate commercial use from 6+. In other words, you couldn't put like commercial mixed use in class 1 and then 6+ in class 2, which was something I think that was being thrown out there. So I would suggest any creativity we want to get in that regard, or maybe like we've talked about several times in the years past, some kind of graduated homestead, like this commission has raised, for instance, like less than 250 at 30% homestead exemption, and 251 to 500 at 25%, and over 500K at 20% homestead, or something like that. Any of these creative ideas, like our sister jurisdictions, would just need an ordinance. And I think the biggest obstacle there is allowing us to help craft and look out there for cases that might suggest any impediments on constitutional grounds. I feel like that's the biggest challenge to some of these schemes. And so, you know, our office would be happy to look into any pitfalls as we think through creatively what might be a different way of creating that homestead or non-owner occupied rate.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Solicitor on this topic? Okay, so next week, what's the date?
The 18th.
The 18th, okay. Is everybody
Is that
available?
Wednesday?
Monday.
It's a
Oh, I'm
Monday.
sorry, that's right, because today's the.
So
I can
next
do that now.
week, we're gonna look at models. So we have been running some numbers.
Oh, good.
And on the tiered rate, we pretty much had we had a goodly amount of work done already on the tiered rate, because we actually went to the General Assembly and asked for a tiered rate model, and that was a percentage homestead. We've been looking at a flat rate homestead, at treating the homestead as an exemption. We have a model where we're looking at owner occupied, non-owner occupied, bifurcated, if you will, plan is what we've been calling it. We're also looking at classifications of property. And Lisa, excuse me, Solicitor Freeze, will you be able to physically be in the room next Monday?
Just looking, hold on a sec.
The delay was killing me.
No, I haven't.
really need.
I have a dinosaur of a scheduling book that I have to refer to at all times. Yes, I can be.
We need you because it's kind of critical that you're with us on looking at classifications of property. Gives us an opportunity to maybe come up with different rates. So an owner occupied rate, non-owner occupied rate, whether you're 1 to 5 family, and then maybe 6 to a certain number, 10 or whatever, on small commercial apartments, if you will. They're another rate. Looking at those classifications, I think helps us, and it also gets us to a truer picture of what we're taxing. So anyway, we're gonna have some models, and I'm interested in the value of the TSA versus the rate. There's gotta be a break even, if we can figure out what that math would be, but we're still working on that. But next week is all gonna be about models, maybe having some summary thoughts, discuss. We don't have anything else to raise, unless commissioners.
No, I would just, if I may, Madam Chair, very quickly, to me, it's very exciting to have the opportunity to look at these tiered classification rates, because I hadn't, as much as I've done in this work from a legal perspective, I had not really focused on the policy issue of the fairness of these rates and the pass-through of the rent to the tenants. And so where we have, and when we heard from the smaller apartment owners, and you know, that you've got this middle ground of these 6, 12, 15 unit buildings that really, some of which are taking advantage of some discounting and some aren't. And we probably are not doing this very equitably. And for the benefit of the single family homeowners and the 2 family homeowners, it ought to be more equitable. So I think this classification thing can be really a good driver of making the tax fair on the right.
Fair and predictable.
On the units.
and
And then
transparent.
if we can layer on the big apartment, those particularly downtown, where, a rate that's more competitive than this flat commercial rate as if it were an office building, because those rents get passed through the tenants as well. And if that works, if the math works, we're probably doing something very fair.
We've had some, it's very interesting and exciting. I can't wait to present
Yeah.
it and get your input, but it is fairer. I think.
I don't want to jump the gun, but I would like to discourage us from favoring small apartment buildings over larger ones, because we actually need the larger ones.
Yeah, I'm sorry, if I implied otherwise, that's what I meant. I meant that if we tax the apartment as revenue producing income and homeowners as homeownership, that, I said it back, if I said it backward, I apologize. That's what I
have
meant.
this discussion. I have a burning desire, it disturbs me when we're looking at, well, I shouldn't say disturbs, that's a strong word, but, when we're looking at our residential rates, our commercial rates, we have to work within the state prescribed multipliers of the commercial rate has to be under 2 times.
We don't. We don't hardly any in the city.
We do,
The assessor must do it, don't you?
yeah.
By law, the
Assessor,
assessor
correct.
must follow a prescribed procedure associated with the rate can be no greater than 2 times the commercial times the.
Except you have a homestead that throws that so out of balance that it no longer applies. So you have-
And that's where I'm coming
Yeah,
from.
you have a homestead rate of like, what is it, 10? 11?
Effectively
Yeah,
10.46,
and then you have 36.
your point.
Yeah.
You got there, you got from A to Z real quick. And it's this homestead, this invisible percentage homestead thing that kind of, just disrupts everything. It's really a complicated topic, it's very interesting, but I guess what I'm coming from, or where I'm coming from is, and it's a state prescribed law that we have to work within, as you just articulated. But Lisa, why do we have to work within it? Why is there a multiplier?
I mean, the best way to answer that is we are only allowed to tax as prescribed by the state. And so when the state hands down a statute that says, like this one, 44.511.8, that you can either do a homestead or an owner occupied versus non-owner occupied rate, and then turns around in a subsection and says that this rate can only be a multiplier by this rate. I mean, that's why we don't have any municipal authority to tax absent that which is delegated from the state.
I just have a comment,
Go ahead,
please.
please.
So maybe Providence hasn't gotten the exemption, but many cities and towns do not abide by that law, that general law. They have special exceptions. There's a whole bunch of cities that have rates that are more than twice other rates. And so maybe Providence doesn't, because they never really went to get the special permission, but it's really honored in the breach. There's hardly any guidelines on this in the state of Rhode Island, so.
Commissioner Chief Mancini.
If I might, Madam Chair, I have the assessor here, but the purpose of that prescribed formula is designed to measure the value of the levy up against the rate to distribute fairly the value of real estate amongst its classes. It's a classification ordinance that must be subscribed and followed. I don't know any year that Providence has not followed that rule. I recall a year when Providence had to follow it so closely that we had to postpone a public hearing and a fines meeting because the calculation was not precise. And with due respect, to follow the letter of the law, we asked the clerk to postpone the meeting, to go back in and recalculate the. And the Rhode Island Department of Revenue, Division of Finance, stood by that decision and said, you're right, you need to change it. You have to change your letter because it's that exact. It has to be that exact. And the reason for that is to distribute the fairness between one class of property and the other, commercial versus residential.
It's just a challenge to work
It
within
is.
that.
It has its restrictions, but I think the restriction was designed to lighten the burden over one group of one classification tax versus another.
Commissioner Splosh.
I think what Commissioner DiBiase is talking about is an observation that I've made too, that chapter 44 is filled with,
Yes.
with special exemptions
Yes,
for this town and that town.
Yes, it is.
And that's the part that makes it a dead letter. It's not that the letter isn't correct. It's not that Providence should not follow the law that's actually there. It's just that, you know, it's funny when you're talking to people at the General Assembly about what the law is, they're like, you know, what do you mean? We're just gonna change it. And they change it every year. So that's,
I just wanted, just one more comment. If you follow what goes on in the General Assembly, there is no real state policy on property taxes. Every city and town goes up, asks for a law. It almost always passes without objection. So I don't think Providence should feel like they have any restrictions under state law with respect to any of these guidelines. I mean, we had a report on property taxes. We basically said that Rhode Island has these very nice guidelines, but they're not actually followed because this municipalities have to opt in and most of them haven't, or they've got special legislation. So it's, I mean, just think about how even the timing of the evaluations were easily changed for anyone who wanted to ask. There wasn't any legislative resistance. So I would just not worry
Well, I
about.
can't wait to show you somebody's model.
I would just not worry about that particular aspect of it. So.
Well, I mean, we do have to follow the law. We wouldn't worry about getting the law
Well-
changed, right?
Well,
If I may.
this is a conversation. I can tell we're gonna have a great conversation next Monday. Let's hold for it. However,
I can't
Councilwoman
understand it.
Edouard-
Yeah, a quick timing question, so we're meeting on the, models next Monday, and the following Monday is Christmas. Are we meeting midweek to discuss, because I think our recommendations.
Don't know. We're gonna get through Monday.
Okay.
And I've got till the 6th, so
Okay,
I never-
I just, like, some of the calendars on that.
January, the first week, the first Thursday, is it the 6th?
Yeah.
Had that in my head. The first Thursday in January is our deadline. But, yes, to have a report.
Madam Chair, if I could just direct,
Commissioner Nancy.
if I could just direct your attention to Solicitor Free. She was about to add a comment about legislation.
Solicitor Freeze, please.
We,
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
I feel
off.
like I could go on about this all day, but we could certainly wait till the next commission meeting. I certainly do not share the sentiment that we can ignore state law. I
I didn't think you would.
I
didn't think you
do
would.
You
share.
had to get that in there. The chief wouldn't let that lie.
I had no idea she was gonna say that.
I've got the best model, by the way,
I had
if
no-
we can ignore that.
I had no idea she would say that.
Person
Madam
who will
Chair.
have to defend it
Right.
once we do. I would suggest Commissioner is absolutely correct in that so many special pieces of legislation have been achieved and could be achieved if we asked for it. I don't think the answer is just ignore it. It doesn't matter. So talk about that.
We were suggesting that. Let's have this discussion next Monday. We weren't just suggesting that. Okay, without further ado, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Stone, seconded by Commissioner Stoneman, Councilman Espinosa. All in favor, aye, opposed, I have.
First of all,
That's when I saw my eyes lit up.
Well, anytime. I know you can say that.
So many tenants.
I know you can say that.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Selection of.